I'm fixing that in a minute
Thank you.
when I make my big announcement.
Oh, right.
Hi all, welcome. Property Avenue WA. This is episode 29, would you believe? I'm TV, he's Oscar D'Souza, and we are all about property in WA. The focus is about property. We look forward to your questions. If you happen to be watching or listening, send them through. You can get access via the Champion Bay Settlements Facebook page, or you can go through our Property Avenue WA Facebook page. For those that aren't aware, we now actually have a Property Avenue WA Facebook page. So we put different posts on there. We put different information on there that will benefit you. They might, depending on what you're doing, of course. So there's a range of things. But Property Avenue WA is just a couple of little grey-haired men who we try to be as informative as we can. But the focus is property in WA. We obviously would enjoy lots of questions that you may have about whether you're buying, whether you're selling, whether you're renting. But the focus is about a range of different things that are occurring in the property world here in WA. And it is a different process. It is a different jurisdiction here when it comes to buying and selling. And it's interesting the number of clients that and people that have inquired with me directly from the East Coast. Got a lovely message this week, AD. A lovely message from a client over east as to a compliment to my staff, Erin and Elise and Crystal, and they mainly because of the fact that they were over east. The property was sight unseen, and they were reliant on us for a lot of information, a lot of assistance, and that's pretty special when someone goes out of the way to do that. So, Andrea, thank you so much. It was pretty special when you get one of those on. Every now and then we get them quite a bit, actually. It's quite nice. It's that's what we're all about. We've got a few things we're going to go through this week. We're going to have a look at the week that was, of course. We'll have a look at some of OD's stats that he's got put together, and he does all his homework during the week and gets some facts and figures together. We're also going to have a look at some of the interesting things that have come up this week when it comes to property, both in the rental side of it and also the buying and selling process. We're also going to speak to Oscar because I haven't told you. We've got a new sponsor. Have you heard?
We've got a new sponsor.
Yeah, new sponsor of Property Avenue WA. I haven't had time to announce it, but new sponsor is a Dedicated Property Management. Thank you very much. Fantastic. New sponsors. They're paying nothing, but new sponsor. Yeah, Dedicated Property Management WA. So
fantastic, mate. It's great to have Dedicated Property Management on board. You probably should have consulted them before you did that deal, but I'm ecstatic to have them on board. Really happy.
I know the principal very well, and he said not a problem. Yeah, we had a very big meeting. No, for those that aren't aware, it's a bit of a joke. It's a serious joke. OD, that's his expertise, and he started his new business, Dedicated Property Management. Have a look at his website, and of course we might just get a little bit of info from him tonight with regard to what Dedicated Property Management is about. And but it's about property management, and if he can help you and we can help you, that's what it's all about. We're also going to mention a few things about buying property, some of the special conditions. Are they still imperative in this market? Landlord insurance is an area that we perhaps will just touch on, but try and get an expert in the next few weeks to discuss that. And we're also going to talk to Oscar because of where we are at with regard to Christmas coming up in January and lease renewals, etc., what the process is required with regard to landlord. So who better to ask than the man himself from Dedicated Property Management? And we'll talk about that. Timeframes for contracts. It was interesting that I saw an article this week about the big banks looking at trying to review and improve their timeframes for approvals. They've really drawn way out. They've really gone out a bit. So I think that's an imperative, a pretty important part of the process if that can be improved. And by the way, one other thing that people probably aren't aware of, wasn't necessarily property, but we did have a meeting this weekend. We met on the golf course and we had a little hit, OD. That was a little bit of fun. Let's just say, how would you assess the game? Hello,
Um,
anyway. Hello.
Rusty. Rusty is probably the best way to discuss it.
We had some good shots.
Yeah, look, I mean, it didn't start off too bad. So, when we were in the car park, but yeah, but my game anyway, mate. My game, it went downhill. It wasn't the worst that I've played,
No,
but
good.
I certainly was getting frustrated. It was a very humid morning. That's another thing. But
Beautiful.
I have to compliment you, mate. I think you said you played 3 times or 4 times this year, and yeah, mate, some really amazing shots. And to prepare you for what's coming up for you over the next few days, which I think you'll spend a bit more time at a course.
Yep, at the Kwinana Cup and the Viner Hegarty Trophy on Friday, and then we play the Kwinana Cup on Saturday, Sunday. So looking forward to that, and hopefully I can survive 3 days in a row. Hey, listen, besides all that, let's get on with it. How has your week been, and in general, what has it been like?
Yeah, mate, look, another very good week in Perth real estate. Before I jump into stats and I guess broadly discuss the market of the week that was, you mentioned at the start there about people sending in questions. Questions probably over the last couple of weeks have been a little bit light on, but we know that people are watching because people chat to both yourself and me after the show and during the week, and they mentioned that it was an interesting point that we raised about this or about that, and they meant to ask us, and then they do. They talk to us after the show and then ask us questions. So the show is actually designed to be interactive. So as TV said at the start, we absolutely encourage questions during the show. That creates part of the experience that we can actually answer them live. And of course, if we don't have the answers, if we don't know the answers, we certainly will find them out and we'll report back as well. So really strongly encourage questions. The week, another very strong week in Perth property. It's almost becoming a bit of a broken record to report that, but it really is the case. And I'm in touch with a number of real estate agents. I'm also in touch with a number of property managers as well. There's no other way to put it. It's just a very, very strong market in both areas of the market at the moment. It's a seller's market, there's no question, and it's also a landlord market as well. So, and it hasn't been that way for a long time. We've done really well, or rather, they've done really well this year. But the few years before that, it was very much the ball was in the other court. So, it's nice to see landlords and sellers now finally get their turn at some conditions which are a bit more favourable to them. So over the course of the week, almost another 1,000 sales. So it was actually 910 sales for the week that has just passed, of which 624 of those properties were houses, 155 of those properties were units, and 131 of those properties were vacant lots. Now, it's interesting to note, just on the topic of vacant lots, we've obviously seen a bit of a drop off since the start of that COVID period and the government stimuluses stimulating the construction industry. Those months of May, June, and July was absolutely off the Richter in terms of land sales. Like there was every land subdivision, whether it in Perth, whether it be regional, was absolutely selling off the blocks. Literally selling off the blocks to the extent that they were selling out stages of land that was there ready to go. They were selling out stages, and then they actually were selling out some land that was actually yet to be constructed. And that was entirely as a result of the government stimuluses that were put in place post-COVID. But that land sales rate definitely has dropped off. I think it's a combination of land supply. There's just not as much land as what there was immediately after COVID, and that's land sitting there ready to go. But the other thing being as well, there are timeframes around, as we discussed with Casey Green last week. There are timeframes around new home construction. So in order to benefit from those grants, you have to have certain criteria met, inclusive of building contracts signed, in terms of slabs being down as well. So we would have expected that we'd see a fall in the volume of land sales, and that certainly has happened. So listings are still stable, just over the 10,000 mark for the entire Perth metropolitan area. So we haven't yet seen that dip below 10,000, but stock is still very low at that level. This time last year, there were over 14,000. I think the number is 14,239 listings available in this same week last year. So that's around about a 40% drop in available stock for properties that are available for sale. So the real estate agents are reporting that there's just not enough stock around. And certainly if you talk to any buyers, every single home open that they go to, there's multiple parties there looking through. There's a lineup to actually get into the house. And the sale agents are reporting that there's a number of offers coming in on these properties, and often at the first home open. One stat there. Yeah,
Can I just interrupt for a minute when you talk about the home opens?
yeah.
Is there social distancing occurring? Is that still a process? Yeah, is that so? Yeah, okay. So that's an issue in itself as well, still.
Yeah, absolutely. So they have to be socially distanced.
Yep.
It's entirely up to the real estate agent as to how they police that. But I do know for a fact every single real estate agent is making sure they've got details of every person that comes through the home. And if it does get to that level, there's only a certain number of people that are allowed in a home based on the size of the home, because the
Right.
social distancing relates to the number of people within a certain area. So they have to be they have to be onto it. Whether or not they're actually doing that, I guess that remains to be seen. But I would certainly think the intent there is to abide by the social distancing laws. Back to the stats. One significant stat, aside from just the volume of sales and the number of properties available for sale or rental for that fact, in terms of the average selling days, there's a real significant change there that we've seen, and it was expected in terms of selling days. As at June 30 this year, the average time to sell a property was 50 days on market. That's from the time that the property is first marketed through to the time that an offer is accepted. And the average was around about 50 days to sell a home. 3 months later, on September the 30th, that average has fallen substantially down to 30 days on market.
Well,
So look, and right now, where are we? We're the 10th of November today, so we're a good 5 or 6 weeks past the 30th of September. I believe that if we spoke to most real estate agents, they'd be reporting that 30 days, even today, and only 6 weeks beyond the 30th of September, it actually sounds like that number sounds a little bit high, because I know for a fact that they're selling many homes at the first home open, and that time to sell the property really appears to be far less than 30. So when they next collate the data, which should be 31st of December, I think it is, I'd expect that 30 number to have dropped even further, and maybe it'll be somewhere between 20 and 25 days on average to sell a home. It might even be a bit tighter than that.
Well, I'm aware of the situation on the weekend, and obviously for the matter of privacy, I wouldn't mention who or whatever, but I'm aware of the fact that these clients actually, both sellers and buyers, got together before it went to market, and deal done. So there's that situation, and I'm also aware already I've had a couple of scenarios where the asking price, the buyers have been so enthusiastic, have identified the property that's what they want, and have actually upped the price to what was actually being asked to ensure they got the property. Now, that's already happening, which surprised me. I didn't think that was happening that quickly. I've heard of a few in Perth, but even in some regional areas now, including Geraldton, I've already seen that happening.
Yeah, so it's happening in Perth, it's happening regionally, it's happening definitely in the selling market, it's also happening in the rental market. In fact, I think it probably started in the rental market a little bit earlier than it did in the selling market, and that is offering above what the asking price is, whether it's a property for sale or whether it's a property for rental. So excuse me, we're definitely seeing that at the moment, and that is because the supply is too low. and the demand is basically too high based on the supply. So it's not unexpected. We've been here before, but we probably didn't expect that would happen this year. So that's the market that we've got. Rentals, again, still extremely strong, and we've heard a lot in the last 3 or 4 weeks about the rental crisis here in WA. There's no new news there. It absolutely is a rental crisis, which I believe, and I think every statistic indicates that it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. Normally, we're leasing 900 to 1,000 properties every week. The week just gone, we've leased in Perth, the metropolitan area, 772 properties. And again, that's by no means because these things coming out of the market or there's not the demand there. It's not that at all. It is entirely that there's just not the supply there of properties. So that's why we've actually seen a fall in the volume of leasing transactions, not because the heat's coming out of the market. And I know that just because I deal with what I deal with day to day, together with the number of property managers that I talk to around Perth. It's very much a rental crisis, though. We've still got less than 3,000 properties. I think it's 2,814 properties throughout the whole of Perth available, and that is a vacancy rate just over 1% for the Perth metropolitan area, which is absolutely a problem. 12 months ago, the supply was in excess of 6,000 properties. I think it was 6,118 properties in this same week last year. And today, again, it's under 3,000. It's 2,800. So that's a 50% drop in a very short space of time. So again, no major shift there, just a very tight rental market. And we obviously keep an eye on what's going on in Geraldton in terms of the rental market. And mate, for over the last couple of months, it was sub 100 properties for the whole of Geraldton. Then it dropped to below 90. Then it dropped to below 80, and it was sitting in that 70s for a while. And my data today shows that if I'm going to rent a property in Geraldton right now, I've got 64 properties in total to choose from.
Wow.
And that includes all houses. It includes all units as well. Like every single property that's available for long-term rental in Geraldton, there's a touch over 60 properties through the whole of Geraldton, and that's not a lot of properties. So I also scanned realestate.com and looking at the asking prices of a number of rentals, because I've got a property up there at the moment, and it's a four bedroom, 2 bathroom home, $350 a week any day of the week, so that's about right. But I literally saw a property, I think over the road in the same street, at $110 a week higher, and it's a very, very comparable property. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of price movement there as well.
Yep. Mate, we've just had a question from Joanne, who's great, and also Justin Collins, one of our previous guests from Appraisal.
So many questions.
I know.
We're going to be overwhelmed.
But he's not a question. He just likes Dedicate Property Management's how smartly dressed you are and your new logo. He's impressed.
Does he really?
Yeah. He's
Thanks,
actually
JC.
I know.
That's very, very kind of you, mate. I'm a fan of it myself, obviously, but it's nice to get that pleasant feedback. Absolutely.
I actually played with the Viso boys golf. Talking about golf, I had a hit with them on Thursday. I was a guest. They were the sponsors up at Geraldton, at the Geraldton Golf Club, and I played with the boys, and great fun had by all. So a shout out to all the boys at Viso at the different locations around the state. So and as I say, we're trying to get Just back on to do a couple of insurance things. So good to see. So Joanne's question was that she wants to privately sell a house, and she wants to know, does she just get an evaluation through the real estate, or is there another option? And she have tenants in there who are interested in buying. So do you want to go first, or shall I?
Look, I might just start and touch on one or two points that come to mind with that, and then I'll let you get into some more nitty gritty if that suits you. But okay, so private sale of the property, it can be done. There's no issue with it, and there's lots of people that do it successfully. I'd have to say that I know there's more people that do it unsuccessfully. And me, even being in real estate for the time that I have, it is going back a number of years. It might be as much as 20 years, maybe somewhere between 15 and 20 years ago. And I knew what I knew about real estate, and I decided that I was going to sell my own property at the time. And after 3 or 4 weeks in a pretty decent market, I didn't get the result. It didn't happen the way that I wanted it to. And even me being a licensed agent and valuer in my background, I decided to list it with a real estate agent and let them do their thing, basically. So you can do it, but you can probably hear the hesitation in my voice. And the reason being is most of the time that people will want to sell their own property ultimately is to save paying a real estate agent what is quite a sizable fee. There's no two ways about it. But is it worth paying them the fee for the service that they provide if they do a good job? So, and that's a big if, because they've got to do a good job. They've got to prove their worth. It absolutely can happen. And also, if you've got a tenant there that is your buyer sitting there waiting to go, that's a good thing. In as much as if there's a successful deal that can be negotiated there that is okay with them and it's okay with you, then yeah, that absolutely could work. And so far as working out, well, what's the value going to be? Absolutely, you can get a couple of real estate agents in to give you an appraisal as to what they believe. You can also get a licensed valuer, which you will need to pay probably a few $100, maybe $300, maybe $400 to get a licensed independent valuer to come through and provide to both parties what they believe the property is worth. And that being fully justified within a valuation report, and you can take it from there and negotiate a deal with the tenant if you choose. So, but what I would say is that if you do choose to go down that angle and you're going to save on a real estate agent's fees, make sure that you've got someone in your corner that knows real estate and can really make sure that you're not going to run yourself into strife. And that could be someone like Tony Viner, someone like me, but just someone that might not be your real estate agent, but someone that you can turn to for some advice. Because when these things go wrong, every time that I've known of a situation going wrong, it's always the response of the person that was trying to effect the private sale. They always go back and say, oh my God, I wish I had just gotten some help in the first place, because they're trying to save some money. And I get that, I understand that. But if it ends up costing you more, or if it costs you a whole lot of stress and you don't actually end up saving some money, you'd have to ask the question why. So surround yourself with some good advice.
Joanne, I will respond to that as well because I personally do, beyond the settlement agency, I also do a lot of consulting work associated with property, and that entails a lot of private work. And so, contrary to what Oscar's saying is, well, I agree to Oscar to a point. But however, if you've got a prospective buyer, then as long as you've got someone, I would recommend is what Oscar is saying, is recommending getting someone to assist you, and that assistance is putting the contract together. We're not in a position, someone like myself is not in a position to negotiate the deal, but certainly there is no shortage of occasions where I see both buyers and sellers. I sit down with them. There are some things that I'm going to recommend for the seller. Now, there may be some, particularly in the legal profession, who suggest that's conflict of interest. But to be honest, that's quite often what happens with real estate agents on a day-by-day basis. They're dealing with the buyers and the sellers. But what I will do is, in my case, for example, is sit down with both buyers and sellers and address the contract and identify the various special conditions, which are very, very important in the structure of the contract. So identifying what the buyer requires in the context of the contract, ensuring the timeframes, if it's finance involved, ensuring the timeframes are reasonable and sensible to both parties and are achievable, more particularly, because that is one area that even done by real estate agents at times, we pull our hair out as settlement agents when you get a contract and you see timeframes that are really really putting pressure on everybody, and are they achievable? But special conditions are really important. So yes, I suppose first things first is getting a real estate agent to do an appraisal, perhaps getting two, and that's giving you a bit of a ballpark figure of where you're at value wise, and what price you're going to ask when it comes to your contract. And as Oscar's already said, the other alternative is getting a licensed valuer, and depending on where you are, that's sometimes easier said than done. So just be conscious that some areas in the country, you don't have an immediate access to a valuer, so there may be a time issue there, but certainly something that we would recommend before, unless of course the two parties have already come to an agreement about a price. But from the question that you've asked, Joanne, it appears that's not the case. And so that would be the way that I would approach it. But certainly when it comes to putting the contract together, someone like myself, or you may have a settlement agent of your choice, they are probably the most appropriate people to see. Then they would be, not only are they providing the right document. I had one recently where the clients thought, oh, well, we've got it all organised. TV, can you now fix this for us? We're doing a private contract. And the contract was like 2002. So the contract was way out of date. We had another situation where someone thought they were doing the right thing, downloaded a contract off Mr. Google or Mrs. Google, depending on which way you want to look at it. And of course, the contract was not even an Australian contract. And again, it's really imperative with regard to when you write up a contract, you're writing it in the right form. And it's not, for example, the jurisdiction in WA compared to Victoria and New South Wales is completely different. So the processes and the general conditions associated with that contract are really, really important with the whole process. And as I always say, one of my favourite little terminologies that my staff laugh about, but you've got to cater for the what if. And, you know, as much as everything seems all rosy and we're all good with that, no, we don't have to worry about this, we don't have to worry about that. Sorry, boys and girls, we do. We need to dot the I's and cross the T's, whether it be private contract or going through a real estate agent. We need to be specific. We need to identify our timeframes and be clear about the timeframes. And we need to agree on all pages. There's no sense then later on saying, oh, they got it cheap, so I'm not going to bother about these things. Well, hang on, you agreed on the price. And they are important factors in the whole process. And that's where someone like ourselves are an important part of that if you're going to do it privately. There are avenues, if you haven't already identified a buyer, there are different avenues to doing your property privately. And I've certainly done it privately and done it with no qualms and enjoyed the experience. But not everybody enjoys doing that. And there's an element of confidence about it too. And as OD said, even with his background, sometimes you may just want to be at arm's length from it all. But from what Joanne's saying, in circumstances like what she's talking about, certainly, Joanne, very much it's doable. It's a case of identifying which way you're going to do when it comes to assessing a price, and then a case of finding someone like ourselves at Champion Bay Settlements or myself direct, and we can assist you with that. So hopefully that answers that question for you.
Yeah, and just rounding up on that, TV, just three quick things. Look, I don't mean to sound cynical about it or negative about it. I just, with my background and I guess my experience, I've just seen more of those situations. I've seen some of them work, but the ones that haven't worked, it ends up causing a lot more heartache and often money than the money that was tried to be saved in the first place. So far as me, and when I tried to sell my own place going back all those years, I did absolutely, I should have from the start made sure that I was arm's length away. I was removed from it just so I could have some sort of a middle party that would deal with the buyers, because I don't think the buyers really liked dealing with me being the owner. Like they in fact wanted to have that arm's length distance from the seller. And I ended up going down that track anyway in terms of engaging an agent. And then also the difference between, like, you've obviously sold a property recently privately yourself, but that's not the everyday scenario because everyone doesn't have the 40 years real estate experience that you do. So, you've obviously got a far greater level of knowledge than most people in property. And sorry, mate, something's popped up on my screen. I've got to get rid of that. Yes. Sorry. Yeah, so you've got a far greater experience and knowledge in property than most real estate people, let alone the layman. So yeah, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm certainly saying just make sure that you look into it well, you understand why it is that you're wanting to do it, and then surround yourself with some good advice that doesn't need to be a real estate agent.
Yep, well done. Joanne, she just said thank you very much, and she's got no doubt she'll have more questions. But Joanne, I'll have my number, or you can send me a message, and I'm more than happy to contact or talk to you later on if you want to have a private conversation and discuss the matter. Now, the other thing being is, and Joanne, thanks a million for your questions. If anybody else got any questions out there, you're more than welcome to ask them via our Facebook page, be it Property Avenue WA or Champion Bay Settlements, or we also have a YouTube channel. So you're more than welcome to ask the questions. Some of the things that have happened this week, we talk about rentals, and something that I've noticed, and again, we're talking about private rentals, but the process when it comes to renting a property, it's a bit like buying a property. There are people out there queuing up. And so, therefore, you've got to ensure that you do your homework and you get things right. The applications for a rental, you're the property management guru. What would your advice be for people that are out there, whether they're doing it privately or doing it with a property manager? There's a process.
Yeah, and the process shouldn't be any different whether it's done as a private application or whether it's done as or through a real estate agent. The process really should be exactly the same, and that is honest application, transparent application. Make sure that it's a strong application that has got every detail that is actually asked for, so that you're not waiting for a property manager to come back and say, oh, hang on, you haven't provided your ID, or I don't have your personal referees, I can't get in touch with your employer, or you've got to make sure that your application is as strong as possible given the current market that we've got, because property managers simply don't have time, or even private landlords, they really shouldn't have time at the moment to come back and have to chase up incomplete applications. So I'd go so far as even having a chat to your referees and letting them know that you've submitted an application, this is the time that it's gone in for processing, and sometime within the next 24 hours you can either expect a phone call or an email from ex real estate agency or from ex Mr. Landlord to let them know that they're going to be in touch to confirm employment, past rental history, or a personal reference as well. So being as proactive and making your application as strong as you can, with all the information. It's not all about having the highest rental price. That obviously helps, but put it this way: if you're offering $20 a week more than the asking rental, but your application is only 60% complete, and someone's actually offering the rental price, but their application is 100% complete, and all the referees were responded to the inquiry from the real estate agent, but it's a little bit less. The property manager has not got the time to be chasing and coming back to you. Bearing in mind, it's not just you. There's probably another 5 or 10 applications on that same property. So they've got to get the property leased quickly, because that's in the best interest of the landlord. So strong, complete, transparent applications. That's the way to go.
Mate, with an application, for those that are looking at what are the application and your referees, what should they be providing when they apply? So if you've got my property that you're renting out, what are you advising if someone Tony Viner contacts you and wants to rent a property that you've got listed? What are the basics that should be provided?
Oh, well, look, I mean, the application forms, TV, these days are pretty standard. So we need to have employment references details. So we need to be able to confirm that ultimately you've got a job, you're going to be able to meet the financial commitments of the lease. rental references in terms of your past rental history. So property managers, private landlords, people that we can talk to confirm where you previously rented, if that's possible. Or obviously if you've had a history, and we need to be able to talk to them and find out what you were like as a tenant. Did you keep the place clean? How was the place left when you finished? Were there any breaches? What were your rent arrears like? And confirm, were you the type of tenant that that we should be considering? Um, and with regard to your referees as well, I mean, typically referees, you're going to be putting down people that are obviously going to tell a good story about you. You're not going to put down, the ones that aren't going to say what you want them to say. But I think that the main thing is that being a transparent process, just making sure that they're aware that someone's going to be in touch, because there's nothing more frustrating for a property manager going through your application. Everything is looking pretty reasonable. They're satisfied that you can afford the rent, but they can't get in touch with your referees because they're on leave, or they don't work there anymore, or they don't exist, or So that's the proactive stuff that a tenant can currently do to improve the success or the positioning of their application.
Hey, changing direction a little bit with regard to rentals and going back to buying. A couple of things that I've had inquiries from clients this week, over the past week or so, has been associated with units and strata properties. Now, some people are a little bit nervous about strata properties, and they go, "Oh no, hang on, they're expensive, and you've got strata levies, etc., etc." But when you consider, in some cases, a strata property, and you consider the strata levies, when you consider what those strata levies cover in a lot of cases for units and apartments, they really cover a lot of things that in some ways are probably cheaper than they are if you're running your own home that's not strata. Because those strata levies cover various maintenance issues. They include looking after gardens, if there's gardens in the complex. If there's a pool, it includes maintenance of the pool that you've got access to. I know insurances. I know a unit we have, it also includes the gas. It also includes the water. So you don't have a separate bill for water, and you don't have a separate bill for gas for your unit. So there's a range of things there that probably are a little bit of a myth when it comes to a unit or an apartment that some people are a little bit unsure of. Have you got some thoughts when it comes to units and your experience?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's no question that strata is a bit more complicated or a bit more detailed than your normal green title purchase, because green title, or even to an extent survey strata title, is you can basically do what it is that you need to do on your property, and you don't need to share costs with people, and you don't really need to be talking to your neighbours about things that you want to do at or on or in the property. You've got a bit of a free rein, subject to what the council requirements are. But when it comes to strata, you're part of a complex typically of units, and there's always a share in the common property, and there's part of the strata that you do own, there's part of the strata that you don't own, and there's part of the strata that you own with other people. So there's more things, there's more lots, and there's more people to take into consideration. The myths, I guess, though, often relate to strata levies, and I guess the bottom line is the strata company itself, which is the body corporate, the group of owners. That's not a business that is looking to profit. It's not looking to make money from anyone. So the only thing that your strata levy should be covering is the running costs of the complex, which includes a lot of those things that you just said. And those running costs are going to be billed to you as part of your strata levy, which is based on your unit entitlement. So if you've got a smaller unit and there's lots of other bigger units, the amount that you contribute in the strata levy is going to be proportionate to the size of your unit. In actual fact, it's proportionate to the value of the unit. But if we just, for argument's sake, just relate the size to the value, and so therefore the value of your unit is less in comparison to most of the others, you'll proportionately be paying a smaller strata levy than the other ones. So but it's not there to make a profit. It's not trying to, there's not a markup of 20% or anything based on the cost of the provision of those services. You do need to be aware, though, that with strata properties, and particularly as there's more services or more components to the strata, excluding the units themselves, such as pools, such as saunas, such as gymnasiums, such as extensive common grounds, and all those sorts of things, that you must be aware that those obviously come with their own running costs, and it is the responsibility of all the owners via the strata company to make sure that those are upkept and maintained and repaired as and when they need to be. In particular, as the complex of units becomes older, that's when those costs can become a bit more real, because when everything's new, there's nothing really too much to do, so the strata levies might be less. But as the complex becomes older, pools get older, gyms get older, pumps get older, all those things basically get older, and ultimately it's the responsibility of all the owners in the complex. They need to foot the bill for the repair or the renovations or whatever it might be. So I'd suggest that anyone who's looking at purchasing a strata property, they should really be looking into maybe going back, a couple of years in terms of the minutes of the annual general meetings of the strata companies, talking to other owners, talking to the strata manager, and work out if there are any issues that have happened recently or even over the last couple of years that is likely to impact on them financially moving forward in terms of their responsibility in being a strata owner within that complex.
Our JC is all over it. He just made mention that the new strata legislation would be a good subject to discuss. And certainly, as I just have responded, it is our intention to have that as a separate topic in one of our episodes when we get, I've got a couple of people in mind to get on board. Hey, listen, getting back to stratas and buying, one of the other things that I consider and I raise with my clients who've asked employed me to assist them on a consulting basis is consider bylaws. Be very aware of the bylaws and get a copy of those bylaws to identify, what you can and can't do with your property, because there are various restrictions, and some of those restrictions, particularly depending on the size of the complex, the restrictions with pets, for example. So if you intend to buy a property and you've got 2 cats and a dog, then if you're going to buy an apartment, you need to be very careful that there is no restrictions from you having a pet on the premises. So there are things like that. And another thing that's really important, in fact, this is important even if you're buying a home, but certainly if you're buying a unit or an apartment, just clarify at the time of the point of sale when you've made a decision saying, yep, I'm really keen on this property, check with your agent, or if it's a private contract, check with the seller. Is that property going to be vacant possession? If it's your intention to buy that property to live in and you intend to move into that property on settlement being effected, if there's a lease in place, then you will not be able to take possession unless it's been identified in the contract as vacant possession.
Yeah. And that's the case with strata. It's the case with green title, obviously, as well.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. So they are important areas that you need to identify, particularly, probably more so, when I say more so, if you're buying a unit apartment, quite often it can be a situation where there's a more possibility that they are rented out. But certainly that can be the same with, as Oscar just said, it can be the same if it's a house. So, but it is a situation in this current market where everyone's going a million miles an hour. The agents are anxious to get the sale happening. The sellers are obviously anxious for the sale to happen, and the buyers are perhaps sometimes a little tentative. They say, "Oh, I don't want to miss out because there's other people interested." Yeah. And sometimes, let's not kid ourselves, sometimes that's the suggestion made by the real estate agent. Don't put too many things on the contract because, want to make it as clean as possible, because they'll look at this before they look at someone else's. And then all of a sudden you've put yourself in, you're back in damage control, because all of a sudden settlement's affected and you find out you can't move into the place because someone's in there for the next 9 months. And we've experienced that. We've experienced that firsthand.
I guess something that protects the buyers in the case of strata property is obviously the amount of disclosure that a seller of a strata property has to make available to the buyer at the time of signing the contract, or actually just prior to, but definitely by the time of signing the contract. And that is the seller's disclosure. And because normally there's a real estate agent involved, that disclosure and the responsibility therefore falls on the real estate agent. So the buyer really, should be asking the questions, of course, but there shouldn't be too many questions to ask, because if you've got a real estate agent doing the job that they're supposed to, they should make available all that information, and you should be fully armed with everything that you need to know at the time of you making a decision to purchase a strata property. So that said, it's always handy to know what you should and shouldn't be asking, because sometimes things don't go to plan, and you might not have been given everything that you should have.
Yeah. Which is another point with regard to buying a property. It's still imperative, no matter what the circumstances, if there's been a discussion, it's imperative that you identify and include the special conditions that you want on that contract. Don't just avoid it on a verbal because you're concerned about missing out on the purchase. Because my biggest, and as I like your little phrase that you referred to when we were talking earlier on today about a matter, where the purpose of the exercise is preventing future problems. And this is a classic example. Get your special conditions right. And if you're not sure, if you want to get an independent opinion, or you want to check with your settlement agent or check with someone like myself, and we're more than happy. The amount of contracts that I have addressed on behalf of clients over the last week alone, before they've signed them off, I'd hate to tell you, but it's just, and it's not suggesting the real estate agent's doing wrong, not at all, but it's an independent point of view and ensuring that we're covering all the boxes that you want with regard to your purchase. And as I say, we're not trying to create problems, we're not looking for problems, we're trying to prevent future problems.
So that's the saying, and you basically just said it there as well. So anyone that is fear of missing out on the sale because they're worried about having too many conditions on the offer or whatever, fair enough. You might get in there and you might have no conditions on the offer whatsoever because you've been advised to do that, or you think that you're in a better position to secure the sale with no conditions on there whatsoever. And sure, that might impact on you buying the property and getting it at a good price. But if that creates you more problems later on down the track, you just have to assess, well, how much was it worth to you? So like you just said before, TV, the quote basically is, we're not looking to create problems, we're looking to prevent future problems.
Yep, exactly. Mate, just flicking back to rentals, landlord insurance, which is a really a topic that I wrote down, and lo and behold, you raised it today. What's it mean? What's it all about? And we will. It is intended to follow up with an expert in this area in one of our coming episodes. But just briefly, for those that are looking at renting out a property or investing in property, landlord insurance. What's it mean?
Look, it basically is insurance for a landlord in the event that ultimately, if things don't go to plan with their rental property, so long as they've actually followed the requirements of the insurance policy and obviously that of the Residential Tenancies Act. So private landlords can do it themselves. It can be challenging for private landlords to keep up with the legislation and do everything that they need to under a normal lease, so that in the event of a claim, the insurer will pay out. Stereotypically, insurance, they're not really looking for ways to make sure that they can pay out in the event of a claim. Sometimes it can be said that they'll look for ways that maybe they don't have to because the right process was not followed. So it's really, really important to make sure that if a private landlord is looking after their own properties, that they're following the process to make sure that their insurance is not void. And obviously that goes exactly the same for the real estate agent as well. But and look, I've got a very good friend of mine that is a landlord protection insurance broker, and she's extremely good. But I haven't spoken to her yet about coming on the show. But I do believe that, I don't think there'll actually be a problem. So I reckon before Christmas, we'll definitely have her along. And I'll let her get into the nitty gritty of landlord insurance. But from my point of view, in terms of being a property manager, um, I would strongly advise every landlord that I deal with to take out a landlord insurance policy, because the amount that it costs you, and it's a few $100s. I think when landlord insurance first came out, it was around about $200 per annum to have a landlord insurance policy. It's not that anymore. It's quite a bit more than that, but it's definitely under $1,000. It depends to what level you want to go to. But for what it covers for you in the event that ultimately the tenant does the wrong thing at the property in whichever form, it's worth its weight in gold. It's also tax deductible as well. So it's an absolute no-brainer. And as usual with insurance, it only matters when it matters. It's very handy to have when it does matter.
Hey, our advisor guru, one Justin Collins,
Yeah.
He's just made mention about the landlord insurance that currently COVID restrictions are making it difficult with landlords to devote default cover for new policies. So there you go. That's from the advisor insurance guru.
That's true, but most of the major landlord insurers just in the last month, I think pretty much since the 1st of October, they did have those rent default or rather exclusions, but most of them have now, because we're heading towards the end of the emergency period, and we feel that the worst is over so far as tenant default is concerned. Because we're on the way through to an economic recovery. Most of those the major insurers have come back and now include rent default within their policies. So I'm sure the others will follow suit in order to remain competitive very soon if they haven't already.
Hey, I cannot believe the time. Have you realised how quickly we've gone already? I
saw it at 46 minutes and I went far out. So
I know. But just the other thing that I would really like to ask you about, or do you want to keep this for next week, is lease renewals. When it's coming to that stage, I just thought that's something that we perhaps should discuss. Do you want to keep that for next week?
Mate, I will, but let me just touch on it. I think it's a really important point, and so we can expand on it next week. But in a nutshell, for any landlords that have got leases that are expiring around about now or from now through to basically the end of January, it's very important that you are mindful of, if you've got a tenant and their lease is expiring, they obviously have a right to stay in the property under a periodic arrangement through till the 28th of March next year. And as a landlord, you're unable to increase the rent for an existing tenant. That's the first thing. But the second thing is that we know that the rental market is extremely tight, and we know that rents are on the rise as well. So in a nutshell, if you're considering a lease renewal, think of the term, number one. And the second thing is be mindful that your property in terms of a rental is probably going to be worth more now, and certainly at the start of next year, at the end of this emergency period, than what it was when you signed up the lease in the first place. So landlords have waited a long time to be able to benefit from a market that suits them, where they can experience the benefit of growth in the market. All I'm saying is, don't do yourself an injustice by locking in a lengthy lease renewal period where you're going to be locked into a lower rent than what the current market is prepared to pay. So we'll expand on that next week. But and look, if anyone wants more information on that between now and next week, obviously reach out. Be more than happy to discuss that further. But just be careful that you don't, create yourself a bit of a nail in the coffin by agreeing to a lengthy lease period at a rent that probably is going to be well below the current market rent, because our rental market is so strong.
What we might do, I get the a representative from our new sponsor, Dedicated Property Management, next week to come in and have a chat about that. I reckon that would be the way to go.
You probably need to have a chat to them first, though, mate, because I don't even know if they've signed the sponsorship agreement. But you better make sure they're good for it, them and their bank.
I'll go hard. A cup of coffee, I reckon. We're just about at the end, but the other thing that I just want to quickly touch on was, and I mentioned, there was an article the other day that I noticed about timeframes, and I mentioned about this about buying property because I know firsthand I've had one particular contract that has been quite demanding, and I was employed not as a finance broker and not as a settlement agent, but as a consultant to assist and put a number of things together and liaise with accountants and bankers and everybody else. But timeframes, when it comes to finance, be really, really clear. If you're going to get pre-approvals prior to going out to buy, then clarify with your banker or your broker what the expected timeframes you should include, and don't be silly about it. Really, you cannot afford to be silly about it. You've got to be realistic. And I do know, reading an article, I think in the Fin Review or The Age or somewhere, the big banks are conscious that the top finance approvals are taking a long period of time and have gone right out, and they are doing something about it. But again, we might touch on that next week as well, because we're fast running out of time.
Yeah, mate. It's a big problem area for real estate agents, for buyers, and therefore for sellers as well. So that should really be explored. Have we got time for your if question?
Oh, we have got time. We've always got time. Just for those that contributed, Joanne and JC, those that contributed today, thank you so much. Lovely to hear from you. And anybody else, if you've got any questions even after the program, you're always welcome to send them through via our Facebook page. Or through Messenger if you want a private.
Because TV is normally up till about 1 o'clock in the morning after the show anyway, just waiting for questions. So don't make it wait up for nothing.
Don't laugh. Last night I got all organised. I thought, God, I haven't done our advert, haven't loaded our broadcast, got it all organised. 11:45, I went, oh no, I've gone and pushed the wrong key, and I blew it all apart, and it all disappeared. So that's not as silly as it sounds. Hey, listen. Other than the golf and everything else that's been gone about, if question, if you could refurbish one room in your house in any way you wanted, which room would it be and what would you do?
No question in my mind, mate, but the theatre room. We haven't spent much time in the theatre room over the last month. I reckon maybe the last month or two. But prior to that, we had a really, really good 6 months in there, reviews in it, and we loved going in there, and that was the downtime area. Probably actually related a bit to the footy season, now that I think about it, because the footy was on. But, definitely a nice big screen for the theatre room, and maybe even a new couch as well, something that I can absolutely sink into, because I do find these days that, and I said it to Beck just the other day, you know what, when I'm not working at the moment, I'm a little bit bored. I'm a little bit walking around the house going, oh, gee, what now? And I do love to sit down and sink myself into a nice lounge and get involved in something that's on TV. But, so theatre room for me. What about you?
I've got a room that we don't have a theatre room, but we've got a room that I'd like to convert into, I suppose, a theatre room, but a bit of a room that's just a men's cave, if you like, for want of a better term.
Wow.
But I suppose not necessarily describe it as a theatre room, but I'd love to have a room where I could have some of my sporting memorabilia displayed. Got a good TV to sit back and enjoy with a couple of mates and just have that room where I can still share with Jude, or my grandkids come over and we have some fun and watch a bit of TV and whatever. But a pool table, you know, those days I remember as a kid.
Where is this, in Perth, in your Perth abode, or in your Geraldton abode, or in some other place that you've got another house?
Probably Geraldton would be the place where we go and have a little bit of R&R, and I've got that room where we can just, or my mate, we go up to Geraldton and do a bit of fishing and play a bit of golf, and we've got that space where we sit back and just enjoy ourselves and watch the footy or watch the cricket or watch some good sport on TV, and maybe have a game of pool or something. That they used to be a thing that people used to have in their house, and you don't see that anymore. So I'd love to do that.
Have you guys still got your holiday house in Kew?
You idiot.
Hey,
Yeah.
mate, I am an idiot, but do you know what? And just winding up, the funniest ad I think that I've ever seen. You know how real estate agents sometimes put in some things and ads, and it can be questionable about whether it's misrepresentation and all that. I kid you
Yep.
not that long ago, maybe a couple of years ago, I saw a real estate agent who was selling a property in Kew, and their title was After a Sea Change. Not joking, mate. That Kew was the sea change suburb. If someone was looking for a sea change, go to Kew, and I couldn't believe it. So that's a classic case of misrepresentation, I
For
think.
those that don't know what we're talking about or where we're talking about, just go and look and do a bit of a Google. And I've actually been to Kew. No, I won't. There's nothing wrong with
It's
Kew.
not near the beach, mate. It's not near the
But it's
beach.
not near the beach. No, it's definitely not near the beach. Hey, listen, it's been a great week. And in actual fact, this week's been good because I don't have to rely on you and Casey Green to wind up the show. I'm actually
Yeah,
still here.
good.
I don't know what happened last week. For those people that wonder what was going on, did I walk off and in discussing? No, just something went bizarre. And I went back and checked the program after, and it all was going fine. It was just my end. And the professionals in Casey Green and Oscar D'Souza just ran along like there was no tomorrow. And as true professionals, they wound the show up like nothing had happened. So, mate, been a great
At
week.
your age, mate, at your age, things are going to go wrong with your end all the time, mate. So nothing new there.
Anyway, thanks, Amelia. It's been a great week. I really enjoyed this week. I think we covered some really good topics. And for those that contributed, thanks, Amelia. Been a pleasure. Have a great week. Stay safe. I think it's only about another few days and the borders open. So that'll be another interesting topic.
Yeah.
Where things go, what sort of enthusiasm that will go. For all the golfers that are travelling from Geraldton down to Perth to play in the Kwinana Cup, travel safe. And, mate, I look forward to catching up with you next week and all those people that join us. Take care. And
Let's make America great again.
Big yours?
Let's make America great again.
We could have discussed that too. Take care.